The towering alien spacecraft hovered silently over the bustling human city, its sleek metallic exterior shimmering in the afternoon sunlight. Crowds of awestruck onlookers gathered in the streets, necks craned upwards as they whispered in hushed tones about the unprecedented event unfolding before their eyes. In the control room of the alien vessel, a panel of stern-faced diplomats closely monitored the human response, their inscrutable features betraying no hint of emotion. They had spent decades preparing for this momentous first encounter, rehearsing every possible scenario, but the reality of it all still left them feeling a strange mixture of trepidation and cautious optimism. "What is the status of our communication efforts?" inquired the lead diplomat, her gaze fixed on the sprawling cityscape below. "We have established a basic audio and visual link, but the humans have yet to respond," reported one of the junior officers, his four-fingered hands dancing across the holographic interface. "They appear to be in a state of shock, as we anticipated." The lead diplomat nodded slowly, her brow furrowing in concentration. "Very well. Maintain the connection and continue attempting to make contact. We must proceed with the utmost caution." On the ground, a hastily assembled team of human officials and scientists huddled around a bank of communications equipment, their eyes glued to the flickering display as they tried to make sense of the alien technology. General William Stanton, a seasoned military commander tasked with overseeing the encounter, paced back and forth, barking orders and fielding a barrage of questions from the media and panicked civilians. "We're working as quickly as we can to establish communications," he assured the gathered crowd, his weathered face set in a determined expression. "Rest assured, we are taking every precaution to ensure the safety of our citizens." Just then, a crackle of static emanated from the speakers, and a series of strange guttural sounds filled the air. The scientists leaned in, their brows furrowed in concentration as they attempted to decipher the alien language. "We're receiving a transmission," one of them announced, her eyes widening with a mixture of fear and awe. "It appears to be a greeting, or perhaps an introduction." General Stanton stepped forward, clearing his throat as he gestured for silence. "This is General William Stanton, representative of the United Nations of Earth. We have received your transmission and are prepared to engage in diplomatic talks. Please identify yourselves and state your purpose here." Another burst of alien chatter filled the air, accompanied by a series of flickering lights on the spacecraft's hull. The scientists exchanged a flurry of hushed whispers, their fingers flying across the keyboards as they tried to translate the message. "They're identifying themselves as the Valkyrie," one of them reported, his voice trembling slightly. "They say they are a peaceful, space-faring civilization, and they've come to establish contact with the humans of Earth." General Stanton felt a surge of cautious optimism, but he knew better than to let his guard down. The stakes were too high, the potential consequences too dire. Clearing his throat once more, he addressed the alien vessel with a steady voice. "On behalf of the United Nations, we welcome you, Valkyrie, to Earth. We are eager to engage in peaceful dialogue and learn more about your civilization. However, we must insist that you refrain from any hostile actions while on our planet. Any perceived threat will be met with a swift and overwhelming response." The transmission crackled again, and this time the alien voice sounded almost conciliatory. The scientists strained to make sense of the response, their brows furrowed in concentration. "They say they understand our concerns and have no intention of causing harm," one of them reported, her face breaking into a tentative smile. "They're requesting permission to land and initiate face-to-face negotiations." General Stanton drew in a deep breath, his gaze flickering towards the towering spacecraft. This was it, the moment of truth. With a silent prayer for peace, He nodded slowly and spoke into the microphone. "Permission granted. We will prepare a secure location for your landing and await your arrival." The sleek alien spacecraft touched down in a secluded military compound, its powerful engines kicking up swirls of dust as it settled onto the tarmac. Dozens of armed soldiers surrounded the vessel, their fingers poised on the triggers of their weapons, ready to respond to any perceived threat. General Stanton strode towards the craft, flanked by a team of diplomatic advisors and senior military officers. His jaw was set in a determined expression, but deep down he couldn't help but feel a twinge of apprehension. This was uncharted territory, and the consequences of missteps could be catastrophic. As the hatch on the alien ship slid open, a small contingent of Valkyrie diplomats emerged, their strides measured and their expressions unreadable. General Stanton took a deep breath and stepped forward, extending his hand in a gesture of goodwill. "Welcome to Earth, representatives of the Valkyrie. I am General William Stanton, and I have been tasked with facilitating our initial discussions." The lead Valkyrie diplomat, a tall, slender individual with a distinctive crest of feathered appendages, paused for a moment before accepting the handshake. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the human general, her mind no doubt racing to process the unfamiliar gesture. "Greetings, General Stanton," she replied, her voice a low, resonant hum. "I am Zara, Chief Diplomat of the Valkyrie delegation. We are honored to be here, and we come in peace, as we have communicated." General Stanton nodded, gesturing for his team to step forward. "Excellent. We have prepared a secure facility where we can begin our negotiations. If you'll follow me, we can get started right away." As the Valkyrie diplomats followed the human entourage, a sudden commotion erupted from within the spacecraft. Gunfire echoed through the air, and a lone figure emerged, her hands bound and her eyes wild with fear. "Help me," she cried, her voice high-pitched and frantic. "They've taken me prisoner." General Stanton's eyes widened in alarm, and he immediately signaled for his troops to stand down. "Hold your fire," he barked, his gaze darting between the Valkyrie diplomats and the captive alien. Zara's expression hardened, her mandibles clicking together in a sharp staccato rhythm. "Unhand her at once," she demanded, her voice laced with a hint of menace. "She is a member of our diplomatic delegation, and you have no right to hold her against her will." The human general held up his hands in a placating gesture, his mind racing to diffuse the volatile situation. "I assure you, this is all a misunderstanding. We had no idea she was part of your delegation. Please, let us take her into custody and sort this out in a calm and diplomatic manner." The Valkyrie diplomat's eyes narrowed, and for a moment it seemed as if she might order her troops to open fire. But then something shifted in her expression, and she nodded slowly. "Very well," she said, her voice dripping with reluctance. "But I must insist on accompanying her to ensure her safety and well-being." General Stanton hesitated, his gaze flickering towards his own security team. The idea of allowing an alien delegation to freely roam their compound didn't sit well with him, but he knew he had little choice. Swallowing his pride, he gestured towards the facility. "Of course, follow me, and we'll get this sorted out." As the group made their way towards the secure building, the captive alien's eyes locked onto General Stanton's, and he was struck by the raw fear and desperation that burned within them. It was a look he had seen countless times before, on the faces of prisoners of war, and it sent a chill down his spine. Once inside the facility, the Valkyrie diplomat and the captive alien were ushered into a private room, with a team of armed guards stationed outside. General Stanton stood before them, his expression grave. "I understand this is a tense and delicate situation," he said, his voice low and measured. "I give you my word that we will treat your delegate with the utmost care and respect. But I must insist on maintaining custody of her until we can verify her status and the circumstances of her capture." Zara's mandibles clicked together once more, and for a moment it seemed as if she might protest. But then something in her posture seemed to shift, and she nodded slowly. "Very well, General Stanton," she replied, her voice laced with a hint of resignation. "We will cooperate with your investigation, but I must warn you, the consequences of any harm befalling our delegate could be devastating." The captive Valkyrie delegate, her name later revealed to be Astra, sat rigidly in the sterile interrogation room, her four-fingered hands clenched tightly in her lap. Her eyes darted around the space, taking in every detail with a wary intensity, as if she were a caged animal searching for any possible avenue of escape. Across the table, General Stanton leaned back in his chair, his expression carefully neutral. Despite the tense situation, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of fascination as he studied the alien woman. Her features were strikingly alien, with sharp, angular planes and a crest of delicate, feathered appendages that framed her face. Yet there was an undeniable intelligence and depth of emotion behind her watchful gaze. "I understand this must be a bewildering and unsettling experience for you, Astra," the general began, his voice low and measured. "But I want to assure you that you are not a prisoner, and that no harm will come to you as long as you cooperate with us." Astra's eyes narrowed slightly, and she tilted her head to the side in a gesture that the human general couldn't quite decipher. "Your assurances mean little to me, General Stanton," she replied, her voice a low, resonant hum. "I was taken from my people against my will, and I demand to be returned to them immediately." General Stanton sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose warily. "I'm afraid that's not possible, at least not yet. You see, the circumstances surrounding your capture are still unclear, and we need to thoroughly investigate the matter before we can consider your release." Astra's mandibles clicked together in a sharp, staccato rhythm, and the general couldn't help but flinch at the sound. "Investigate," she hissed, her eyes narrowing to slits. "There is nothing to investigate. I am a member of the Valkyrie Diplomatic Corps, and I was taken from my ship by your soldiers without provocation." The general raised a placating hand, his expression somber. "I understand your frustration, Astra, but you must understand that from our perspective, the situation is not quite so clear-cut. We are dealing with an unprecedented first contact scenario, and the stakes are incredibly high. We cannot simply take your word at face value and risk compromising the safety of our people." Astra's mandibles clicked together once more, and for a moment the general feared that she might lash out in anger. But then something in her expression shifted, and she seemed to deflate, her shoulders slumping slightly. "Very well, General Stanton," she conceded, her voice laced with a hint of resignation. "I will cooperate with your investigation, but I warn you, my people will not take kindly to any harm befalling me." General Stanton nodded, relief washing over him. "Thank you, Astra. I can assure you that we will treat you with the utmost care and respect. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a few questions about the circumstances of your capture." Over the course of the next several hours, Astra reluctantly answered the general's questions, providing a detailed account of the events leading up to her detainment. She described the Valkyrie's initial contact with the humans, the tense negotiations, and the misunderstanding that had led to her being taken into custody. As the general listened, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of empathy for the alien woman. Despite her initial hostility, there was an underlying current of fear and uncertainty in her voice. a reflection of the profound cultural divide that separated their two civilizations. When the interrogation finally concluded, Astra sat back in her chair, her expression guarded but no longer overtly hostile. General Stanton leaned forward, his gaze holding hers. "Astra, I want you to know that we are committed to resolving this situation in a way that is satisfactory to both our peoples. While I cannot promise your immediate release, I give you my word that we will do everything in our power to ensure your safety and well-being during your time here." Astra's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, the general thought he saw a flicker of something akin to trust in her gaze. But then she quickly schooled her features, nodding tersely. "I appreciate your assurances, General Stanton. However, I will reserve judgment until I see concrete evidence of your good faith." With that, she rose from her chair, her movements graceful and controlled. General Stanton watched as she was escorted from the room, his mind whirring with the implications of this first tentative step towards cooperation between their two civilizations. Over the following days, Astra found herself increasingly at odds with her human captors. Despite General Stanton's assurances, she was treated more like a prisoner than a diplomatic guest, confined to a sparsely furnished room and constantly under the watchful eye of armed guards. Every attempt she made to communicate with her Valkyrie brethren was met with obstruction and delay, leaving her feeling isolated and increasingly frustrated. She paced the confines of her cell like a caged animal, her four-fingered hands clenched into tight fists as she contemplated her next move. It was during one of these restless pacing sessions that the door to her room slid open, and a young human woman stepped inside, her hands held up in a gesture of peace. Astra immediately tensed, her eyes narrowing as she sized up the intruder. "Who are you, and what do you want?" she demanded, her voice a low, rumbling growl. The human woman offered a tentative smile, her movements slow and deliberate. "My name is Dr. Emily Sinclair. I'm a xenobiologist, and I've been assigned to study your physiology and cultural customs." She paused, her gaze darting around the sparse room. "I know this must be a difficult and unsettling situation for you, and I wanted to apologize for the way you've been treated." Astra's mandibles clicked together in a sharp, staccato rhythm, her suspicion palpable. "An apology? From one of my captors?" She spat, her eyes glinting with barely contained anger. "Forgive me if I find that hard to believe." Dr. Sinclair's smile faltered, and she took a step back, her hands raised in a placating gesture. "I understand your skepticism, Astra. Believe me, I don't agree with how you've been handled. I've been advocating for more humane treatment, but the military brass can be stubborn." Astra's eyes narrowed, and she crossed her arms over her chest, her gaze boring into the human woman. "And what exactly do you expect me to do with this information? Offer you my gratitude?" Dr. Sinclair shook her head, her expression somber. "No, not at all. I just wanted you to know that there are those of us who see you as a fellow sentient being, not just a curiosity to be studied." She paused, her gaze flickering towards the door. "And I wanted to offer you something that might make your stay a little more comfortable." With that, she reached into the bag slung over her shoulder and pulled out a small, flat object. Astra eyed it warily, her mandibles clicking together once more. "What is that?" she demanded, her voice laced with suspicion. "It's a book," Dr. Sinclair explained, her tone gentle. "A collection of stories from my people's history and culture. I thought you might find them interesting, and perhaps a welcome distraction from the—" She gestured around the sparse room, her expression contrite. Astra hesitated, her eyes flicking back and forth between the book and the human woman. Finally, After what seemed like an eternity, she reached out and plucked the book from Dr. Sinclair's outstretched hand, her movements cautious and deliberate. "I thank you," she murmured, the words seeming to catch in her throat. She carefully turned the book over in her hands, her fingers tracing the unfamiliar title and cover art. Dr. Sinclair's smile widened, and she nodded. "You're welcome, Astra. I hope you find something in there that speaks to you." She paused, her expression turning serious. "And please, don't hesitate to let me know if there's anything else I can do to make your stay more comfortable." With that, she turned and made her way towards the door, leaving Astra alone once more. The alien woman stared at the book in her hands, her brow furrowed in a mix of confusion and curiosity. For the first time since her capture, she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps not all of her human captors were as cold and unyielding as she had assumed. Settling down on the edge of the bed, Astra carefully opened the book and began to read, her eyes widening with each passing page as she immersed herself in the rich tapestry of human culture and history. And as she did so, something within her began to shift, a subtle but profound change that would have far-reaching consequences for both her own people and the humans of Earth. Over the next several weeks, Astra found herself spending more and more time in the company of Dr. Emily Sinclair, the human xenobiologist who had first reached out to her with an unexpected gesture of kindness. At first, their interactions were stilted and cautious, with Astra maintaining a healthy distance and viewing the human woman with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. But slowly, as the days turned into weeks, a tentative rapport began to form between them. It started with the books, the rich tapestry of human history and culture that Dr. Sinclair had provided. Astra found herself captivated by the stories, her eyes widening with wonder as she learned about the triumphs and tragedies that had shaped the human civilization. She would spend hours poring over the pages, her brow furrowed in concentration, as she tried to understand the motivations and emotions that drove her captors. And as she did so, something remarkable began to happen. The walls that Astra had so carefully erected around her heart started to crumble, and she found herself genuinely interested in the humans and their ways. Their resilience, their ingenuity, their capacity for both great cruelty and profound compassion. It was a complex and often contradictory tapestry that fascinated the alien woman. It was during one of their daily discussions that Astra finally mustered the courage to broach a subject that had been weighing heavily on her mind. "Dr. Sinclair," she began, her voice quiet and measured, "I must confess that when I first arrived on your planet, I held a rather negative view of your people." The human woman nodded, her expression understanding. "I gathered as much, Astra. But I'm curious to hear more. What changed your perspective?" Astra paused, her mandibles kicking together as she searched for the right words. It was the books you provided, and our discussions about them. I had always viewed humans as a violent and aggressive species, driven solely by greed and the desire for conquest. She shook her head, a rueful smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "But the more I learned about your history, the more I realized that you are a complex and multifaceted people, capable of both great darkness and profound light." Dr. Sinclair leaned forward, her eyes shining with a mixture of curiosity and empathy. "I'm glad to hear that, Astra. It's true that humans have a complex and often troubled history, but we've also shown an incredible capacity for growth, cooperation, and compassion, even in the face of adversity." Astra nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "Yes, I've come to see that. And it has made me wonder." She paused, her eyes flickering towards the door, as if she feared her words might be overheard. Do you suppose there is a way for our two civilizations to coexist in a spirit of mutual understanding and respect? Dr. Sinclair's eyes widened, and she leaned back in her chair, her expression pensive. That's a profound and important question, Astra. Truthfully, I'm not sure. The path towards cooperation and peace between our peoples is a complex one, fraught with challenges and potential pitfalls. Astra nodded, her shoulders slumping slightly. I feared as much. The differences between our cultures seem so vast, and the mistrust so deeply ingrained. But that doesn't mean it's impossible, Dr. Sinclair interjected, her voice firm. If we approach this with open minds and a genuine desire to understand one another, I believe we can find a way to bridge those divides. Astra's eyes met the human woman's, and for a moment, the two of them shared a silent, charged moment of connection. It was as if, in that instant, they had both caught a glimpse of a future where their peoples could stand side by side, united not by shared blood or history, but by a shared commitment to peace, understanding, and the boundless potential of the cosmos. I hope you're right, Dr. Sinclair, Astra murmured, her voice tinged with a hint of wistfulness. For the sake of both our worlds, I sincerely hope you're right. As their conversation drew to a close, Astra found herself contemplating the profound implications of what they had discussed. The path towards reconciliation and cooperation between the Valkyrie and the humans was sure to be a long and arduous one, fraught with challenges and setbacks. But for the first time since her capture, she felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that if they could just find a way to overcome their differences, the rewards could be truly astounding. With a newfound determination, Astra set her jaw and prepared herself for the battles to come, knowing that the future of both their civilizations hung in the balance. As the weeks turned into months, Astra's daily discussions with Dr. Sinclair began to take on a deeper, more profound quality. What had started as a tentative exchange of information had blossomed into a true cultural dialogue, with both women sharing the customs, beliefs, and histories of their respective civilizations. Astra found herself captivated by the breadth and depth of human culture, from their rich artistic traditions to their complex political and social structures. She marveled at the resilience and ingenuity of a species that had, in such a short span of time, gone from primitive tool users to interstellar explorers. In turn, Dr. Sinclair was equally fascinated by the Valkyrie's unique biology, their complex social hierarchies, and their deeply spiritual worldview. She peppered Astra with questions, her eyes shining with genuine curiosity and a thirst for knowledge. But as their conversations progressed, something even more remarkable began to take shape, a genuine understanding, and even a budding friendship between the two women. "You know, Astra," Dr. Sinclair said one day, her voice thoughtful, "I've come to realize that our two civilizations have more in common than I ever would have imagined." Astra tilted her head to the side, her mandibles clicking together in a contemplative rhythm. "How so, Dr. Sinclair?" The human woman leaned forward, her gaze holding Astra's. "Well, for one, we both share a deep reverence for the natural world and the mysteries of the cosmos. Your people's spiritual connection to the stars, the way you see yourselves as part of a greater cosmic tapestry. It's not so different from some of the oldest belief systems on Earth." Astra's eyes widened slightly, and she nodded. "Yes, that is a profound observation. The Valkyrie have long held the belief that we are but a single thread in the greater fabric of the universe, connected to all things through the ebb and flow of energy and matter." Dr. Sinclair smiled, her expression thoughtful. "And then there's the way our societies are structured, with leaders and thinkers working to guide and shape the course of our civilizations. The parallels are quite remarkable. when you really examine them. Astra's mandibles clicked together once more, and she leaned back in her chair, her gaze contemplative. Indeed, I must confess, when I first arrived on your planet, I had a rather dim view of humanity. I saw you as little more than savage, warlike creatures, driven solely by greed and the desire for conquest. She paused, a rueful smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. But the more I've learned about your history, your culture, your values, the more I've come to realize that we are not so different after all. We are both complex, multifaceted peoples, capable of both great darkness and profound light. Dr. Sinclair nodded, her own expression solemn. That's exactly right, Astra. And I think that's what makes the prospect of cooperation and coexistence between our civilizations so profoundly important, and so incredibly challenging. Astra's eyes narrowed slightly, and she leaned forward, her gaze intense. You speak of challenges, Dr. Sinclair. What do you see as the greatest obstacles to peace between our peoples? The human woman sighed, her brow furrowing in concentration. Well, for one, there's the issue of trust. Centuries of mistrust and misunderstanding have created deep-seated biases and suspicions on both sides. Overcoming that will be no easy feat. Astra nodded, her expression grave. Yes, I can certainly attest to that. And then there are the cultural differences, the disparities in technology and resources. The potential for conflict is ever present. Dr. Sinclair reached across the table, gently placing her hand atop Astra's. But that's why it's so important that we keep talking, keep learning from one another. If we can find a way to bridge those divides, to see each other as fellow sentient beings worthy of respect and understanding, then maybe, just maybe, we can build a future where our peoples can coexist in peace. Astra's eyes widened at the human woman's touch, and for a moment she felt a surge of something akin to hope. Slowly she nodded, her mandibles clicking together in a softer, more contemplative rhythm. Yes, Dr. Sinclair, I believe you may be right, and I am grateful for the opportunity to see your people in a new light. She paused, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. And for your kindness and your willingness to see me as more than just a captive alien. Dr. Sinclair's own smile widened, and she gave Astra's hand a gentle squeeze. Thank you, Astra. I'm grateful for your openness and your willingness to engage in this dialogue. It's a crucial first step towards building a better future for both our worlds. As their conversation drew to a close, Astra found herself filled with a sense of cautious optimism, a belief that, despite the daunting challenges that lay ahead, the path towards mutual understanding and cooperation between the Valkyrie and the humans might not be as impossible as she had once feared. The relative peace and growing rapport between Astra and her human captors was shattered one fateful day when an urgent communication arrived from the Valkyrie homeworld. Astra had been in the middle of another illuminating discussion with Dr. Sinclair when the door to their private conference room burst open, and a pair of armed guards rushed in, their faces etched with a mix of concern and grim determination. Dr. Sinclair, Astra, we have a situation, one of the guards announced, his voice tense. There's been a crisis on the Valkyrie homeworld, and the delegation is demanding your immediate release, Astra. Astra's eyes widened, and she rose from her chair, her mandibles clicking together in rapid succession. What has happened? She demanded, her voice laced with a hint of panic. Speak quickly, human. The guard hesitated, his gaze flickering towards Dr. Sinclair before returning to Astra. I'm afraid we don't have all the details yet, but from what we've gathered, there's been a massive outbreak of some kind of viral contagion on your home planet. Thousands have fallen ill, and the Valkyrie are pleading for your safe return. Astra felt the blood drain from her face, her four-fingered hands clenching into tight fists. My people are in danger, and you still hold me captive, she hissed, her eyes narrowing to slits. Release me at once, or suffer the consequences. Dr. Sinclair rose from her chair, her expression grave. Astra, please, try to remain calm. I know this is a dire situation, but we need to proceed with caution. Your safety is our top priority, and we can't just. My safety. Astra spat, her voice dripping with contempt. My people are dying, and you dare to lecture me about safety. She turned to the guards, her gaze burning with an intensity that made them visibly flinch. Take me to your leaders. Now. Recognizing the futility of further argument, the guards nodded and gestured for Astra to follow. As she strode out of the room, Dr. Sinclair hurried after her, her brow furrowed in a mix of concern and determination. Astra, wait, she called out, her voice pleading. Let us at least try to coordinate a diplomatic solution with your people. We want to help, but we need to ensure the safety of both our civilizations. Astra paused, her shoulders heaving with each labored breath. There is no time for diplomacy, human, she growled, her voice laced with a desperation that Dr. Sinclair had never heard before. My people are in grave danger, and I will do whatever it takes to save them. With that, she resumed her brisk pace, leaving the human woman to hurry after her, her mind racing with the implications of what was about to unfold. When they reached the command center, Astra was ushered into a tense meeting with General Stanton and his top advisors. The situation on the Valkyrie homeworld was dire, with reports of a rapidly spreading virus that was decimating the population. We understand the gravity of the situation, Astra, General Stanton said, his expression grave. But you must understand, we cannot simply hand you over to your people without carefully evaluating the risks. The virus could pose a threat to our own civilization, and we have a responsibility to protect our citizens. Astra's mandibles clicked together in a sharp, staccato rhythm, and she leaned forward, her eyes burning with a fierce intensity. Then you condemn my people to death, she hissed, her voice laced with a raw, primal fury. I will not stand by and watch as my family, my friends, my entire civilization perishes. You will release me, or I will find a way to escape on my own. General Stanton's brow furrowed, and he exchanged a troubled glance with his advisors. The stakes were impossibly high, and the consequences of any misstep could be catastrophic. But as he gazed into Astra's desperate, pleading eyes, he knew that he couldn't simply stand by and let her people suffer. Clearing his throat, the general squared his shoulders and spoke in a firm, resolute tone. Very well, Astra. We will do what we can to facilitate your immediate return to the Valkyrie homeworld. But I must insist that you allow our scientists to accompany you, to study the virus and help develop a cure. Astra's eyes widened, and for a moment, the fierce determination in her expression softened. You would do that? She murmured, her voice tinged with a glimmer of hope. General Stanton nodded, his own expression softening slightly. Yes, Astra. We may be from different worlds, but we are all part of the greater tapestry of life in this universe. And if there is a way for us to work together to save your people, then that is what we must do. Astra regarded the human general for a long, charged moment, her mandibles clicking together in a more contemplative rhythm. Then, slowly, she inclined her head in a gesture of begrudging gratitude. Then let us make haste, General Stanton, she said, her voice laced with a newfound determination. The lives of my people hang in the balance. With that, The stage was set for a pivotal moment in the burgeoning relationship between the Valkyrie and the humans of Earth, a test of their ability to put aside their differences and work together for the greater good of all. The Valkyrie spacecraft streaked through the void of space, its powerful engines propelling it towards the homeworld with a sense of urgency that was palpable even to the human scientists who had been granted passage. Seated beside Astra, Dr. Emily Sinclair studied the alien woman's tense expression, her own brow furrowed with a mix of concern and determination. "We will do everything in our power to help your people, Astra," she said, her voice low and reassuring. "I know how terrified you must be, but you have my word that we will not rest until we found a way to stop this contagion." Astra's mandibles clicked together in a sharp, staccato rhythm, her gaze fixed straight ahead. "I appreciate your assurances, Dr. Sinclair," she replied, her voice laced with a hint of trepidation. "But the fate of my civilization rests on the success of this mission. I cannot afford to be anything less than fully committed to the task at hand." Dr. Sinclair nodded, her expression solemn. "I understand. And you have my promise that we will be equally committed for the sake of both our peoples." As the Valkyrie homeworld came into view, Astra felt a wave of dread wash over her. The once vibrant planet was shrouded in a hazy pall, its surface marred by the telltale signs of widespread devastation. Astra's heart raced as she watched the ship descend, her mind consumed by a single desperate thought. "Underscore, please. Let me not be too late, underscore." The landing was tense and chaotic, with a contingent of Valkyrie soldiers rushing to greet the vessel, their faces etched with a mix of relief and urgency. Astra was the first to disembark, her eyes scanning the frantic scene with a growing sense of horror. "Quickly this way," one of the soldiers shouted, gesturing for the human scientists to follow. "The contagion spreads rapidly, and we are struggling to contain it." As they rushed through the streets, Astra couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between the Valkyrie she had left behind and the ones she now saw. Their normally proud, upright bearing was replaced by a hunched, weary posture, and their eyes were hollow with a despair that cut Astra to the core. When they reached the medical facility, the sight that greeted them only served to heighten the sense of dread. Rows of Valkyrie lay stricken, their laboured breathing punctuated by the occasional, agonizing cough. Doctors and nurses rushed about, their faces etched with a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "We have been unable to identify the cause of the contagion or develop an effective treatment," one of the lead physicians explained, his voice tinged with desperation. "Our people are dying, and we are running out of time." Dr. Sinclair stepped forward, her expression solemn. "Then we must act quickly. My team and I are prepared to assist in any way we can. Please, show us what you have tried so far, and let us see if we can uncover a solution." The physician nodded gratefully, and within moments, the human and Valkyrie scientists were engaged in a frantic, collaborative effort to crack the mystery of the deadly virus. Astra watched from the sidelines, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear as she witnessed the two civilizations put aside their differences and work together towards a common goal. As the hours turned into days, Astra found herself increasingly drawn into the process, offering insights and observations that helped to guide the research. She marveled at the ingenuity and determination of the human scientists, their tireless efforts fueled by a genuine desire to help her people. And when, at long last, a breakthrough was made, a promising treatment that showed signs of halting the contagion's spread, Astra felt a surge of relief and gratitude that threatened to overwhelm her. "You have saved us," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper as she gazed at Dr. Sinclair and the other human researchers. Your people have shown us a compassion and a willingness to cooperate that we have never before encountered." Dr. Sinclair smiled, her eyes shining with a mixture of triumph and empathy. "We're all in this together, Astra, humanity and the Valkyrie. We are part of a greater tech history, and we must work together to ensure the survival and well-being of all sentient life in this universe." Astra nodded, her mandibles clicking together in a soft, contemplative rhythm. "Then let us be allies, Dr. Sinclair," she said, her voice clear and resolute. "Let us forge a bond between our civilizations that will transcend the barriers of culture and history, and work towards a future where our peoples can stand side by side, united in our shared humanity." Dr. Sinclair's smile widened, and she reached out to grasp Astra's hand in a gesture of friendship and solidarity. "I couldn't agree more, Astra. This is the beginning of a new era, one where humanity and the Valkyrie can join forces to explore the wonders of the cosmos and overcome the challenges that lie ahead." As the two women stood together, surrounded by the grateful faces of the Valkyrie, Astra felt a sense of hope and optimism that she had never thought possible. The road ahead would not be an easy one, but she knew that with the humans as their allies, the Valkyrie had a fighting chance to not only survive, but to thrive. And in that moment, she knew that the future of both their civilizations would be forever intertwined, bound by a shared commitment to peace, understanding, and the boundless potential of the stars.